Hello, welcome back to the breaking news update. My name is Jimmy Boyd, and you're watching Boyd News. I want to thank you so much for tuning in today. I've got a breaking news report coming out from Ukraine, and we're going to talk about Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in this video. Take a look at your screen. We're going to be discussing Crimea as well. Zelensky rejects U.S. reports that Crimea will be recognized as Russia. Ukraine will not legally recognize Russia's occupation of Crimea under any circumstances, President Volodymyr Zelensky said during a briefing in Kiev on April 22nd. So, this information was just breaking here in the last few hours on today, April 22nd, on Tuesday. And we've been hearing a lot of reports coming out recently over the last few days that the U.S. was preparing to recognize Crimea as Russian territory in a bid to try to end this war and get Ukraine and Russia to agree to a peace deal. So Ukraine's now coming out and rejecting that. And this is something I'm sure all of us expected, that Ukraine would not accept allowing any territories that Russia's currently controlling to be ceded over to Russia and then be recognized as Russian territory. So I want to show you guys this information today and some of the other things coming out from this press briefing that Volodymyr Zelensky was talking about. So let's go ahead and hop on over here real quick to United 24 Media. We're going to go over this quick report. Zelensky rejects reported U.S. readiness to concede Crimea to Russia. This is coming out today, April 22nd, 2025. Here's a photo of Volodymyr Zelensky as he was leaving from delivering this press conference in Kiev. And it says here, during a briefing with the press on April 22nd, President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed reports from Bloomberg indicating that the United States may be prepared to recognize Russia's control of Crimea as part of a broader peace agreement between Moscow and Kiev. According to sources familiar with the discussions, this potential concession reflects President Donald Trump's eagerness to finalize a ceasefire deal. However, Zelensky firmly rejected any recognition of Crimea's occupation, maintaining that the region remains an essential and undisputed part of Ukraine. There is nothing to talk about. This is outside of our constitution. This is our territory, the territory of the people of Ukraine. This will not happen, Zelensky emphasized. In related news, French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot criticized Russia's Easter ceasefire, describing it as public relations move rather than a genuine effort to reduce hostilities. Okay, so clearly we've got Volodymyr Zelensky coming out completely rejecting this notion that the U.S. is preparing to recognize Crimea as Russian territory. They will not agree to it, is what I'm hearing. And it makes me wonder if by tomorrow we're supposed to be having this major meeting. Ukrainian delegation is going to be meeting in London with a U.S. delegation, and also we might have Russian delegation show up as well. And could we hear some sort of movement on this tomorrow? I'm thinking most likely that Ukraine is going to reject this. We'll have to see. I could be wrong on that, but based on the information that's been coming out recently, it doesn't look like Ukraine's going to agree to that. So I have another article I wanted to show you as well. We'll talk about some other things that Zelensky was stating during his address during this press conference. This also from United 24 Media. Ukraine ready to start talks with Russia if ceasefire agreement is reached, Zelensky says. Okay, this coming out today, April 22nd, 2025. So Ukraine's ready to start negotiating with Russia directly, is what he's saying. Here's another photo of him during this press conference. During a press briefing on April 22nd, President Volodymyr Zelensky discussed the prospects of a potential ceasefire with Russia, affirming that Ukraine is prepared to enter negotiations with Russia in any format once a ceasefire is established. If the Russians are not only ready for a ceasefire tomorrow, but actually stop firing, we are ready to sit down for talks and move forward with other steps to end the war. If something is done in practice, not just empty talk, Zelensky said. Zelensky also commented on the broader geopolitical dynamics surrounding the negotiations, stating, I believe Russia, are trying to push America out of the negotiations. What is happening is to show their leadership. He emphasized that while the U.S. plays a critical role, America is the real leader. We want them to participate. We want them to pressure Russia. Okay, so clearly, as well, we can see here Volodymyr Zelensky is open to negotiating with Russia if we can get a ceasefire in this war. And I do have another video coming out today as well. We have an update from Russia that Russia looks like they are ready to also make moves to try to end this war as well. But we know kind of how things have been with Russia lately. They state one thing and they do the other. So we can only kind of take it with a grain of salt for right now. But I'll show you guys some information on Russia later today. Let's go ahead and hop on over to X now. I've got a few things on independent sources over here that I'd like to share with you also. This one from ViceGrad24. Washington Post reports that the U.S. will propose tomorrow in London that Ukraine and European countries recognize Crimea as Russian territory and freeze the current front line as part of a peace agreement with Russia. Okay, so once again, this is probably 3 or 4 reports we have heard over the last week that the United States was preparing to recognize Crimea as Russian territory. Okay, so we know about that, but take a look at this where it says freeze the current front line. Okay, so that appears to be something they're going to do. So, in terms of these other regions over here, Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson, we're still not hearing anything about the United States recognizing them as Russian territory, and a large part of that is most likely because Russia does not control the entirety of any of those regions. We know that Donetsk and Luhansk, they do control a little bit more versus Zaporizhia and the Kherson region. But as far as we know, none of these territories are going to be recognized as Russian territory, and they would most likely just freeze the line of the conflict in this war. Okay, is what's being reported there from Washington Post today. Now, I've got a quick video coming out from Zelensky during this speech. We'll go over some of these key points here during the conference from Anton Gerashenko. President Zelensky during a press conference today ahead of the peace talks in London tomorrow. As soon as we start talking about Crimea, about our sovereign territories, etc., we enter the format that Russia wants, prolonging the war. Ukraine will not legally recognize the Russian annexation of Crimea. There is nothing to talk about. This is beyond our constitution. This is our territory, the territory of the people of Ukraine. That will not happen. If Ukraine accepts not being in NATO, what will Russia accept? Okay, that's an interesting one too, because we know that Russia does not want Ukraine to be in NATO, but Ukraine wants to get in NATO. So that's kind of something that I've always stated. I mean, how is that one going to be solved there? That's a really tough issue to resolve with Ukraine, because either way, one side wants to get in NATO, the other side doesn't want him to be in NATO. So it also says here Ukraine is ready for an unconditional ceasefire. If it is a partial one, then we are ready for mirrored measures. If they don't strike our energy infrastructure, we do the same. Respectively, if they don't use long-range weapons, Ukraine won't use them. Legal consultations regarding the minerals deal continue. Okay, so it looks like there's still talks going on right now regarding this minerals deal. And you can see here Ukraine talking about like a mirror image. If Russia stops their strikes, Ukraine will do the same, and this war can potentially come to an end, or at least start to slow down and make some steps towards peace. So go ahead and take a look at this clip, just 30 seconds of Zelensky speaking today.
Як тільки ми починаємо говорити про Крим, про наші суверенні території тощо, ми заходимо в формат, якого і хоче Росія, затягування війни, тому що швидко домовитись про все не вийде. Ми 12-й рік воюємо. Це вже відповідь, чи можна з Росією домовитись в цілому, це риторичне питання. Чи можна домовитись з Росією швидко? Ні. Без тиску неможливо. Як тільки ми починаємо говорити.
Okay, so he's talking about several things here, talking about Crimea, saying that they can't even start to talk about Crimea because that will prolong the war. They can't give Russia what they want, which is giving up Crimea over to Russia and recognizing it as Russian territory. He's talking here about they've been at war for 12 years now, and that the U.S. and its partners, European partners, need to put heavy pressure onto Russia, which is something he stated a lot before. Okay, it's just a quick statement coming out from him there. And also from Max 24, the U.S. has not yet responded to the offer to sell 10 Patriot systems to Ukraine, Zelensky stated. So he also said this today during this press conference, that we heard recently over the last week that Ukraine was willing to purchase 10 Patriot missile systems from the U.S. And what we were kind of hearing last week was, at first, Donald Trump was saying that he would not allow Ukraine to even purchase them outright, even using cash. And then we also kind of heard that he was working on it. So I'm thinking there is some movement in the background, but it's obviously moving very slow right now. Just a quick update on those Patriot systems that we heard about last week. Also from next to Kallas, the EU will never recognize Crimea as Russian. The head of European diplomacy, Kaja Kallas, criticized the United States, stating that they had not used all the tools at their disposal to pressure Russia, and said that Moscow had been playing games with the Easter truce as it was not genuinely seeking peace. Last week, U.S. President Donald Trump threatened to abandon efforts to end the war if no progress was made in the negotiations. Collis pointed out that Kiev and its European allies had hoped Washington would take a firmer stance against Moscow. She also noted that it would be a mistake for Washington to consider the issue of recognizing the annexed Crimea as Russian territory in a peace deal. According to her, the EU will never recognize the peninsula as Russian. Crimea is Ukraine, Collis added. Okay, so the EU is coming out saying that they will never recognize Crimea as Russian territory. Okay, so we know how Europe stands. Europe definitely backs Ukraine. They have basically the same policies as Ukraine, the same views as Ukraine. The United States has complete opposite. If anything, they view more Russia's side than they do Ukraine, is kind of how it seems. And you guys can let me know how you feel about that. But it looks like the EU does have Ukraine's back on their decision to not recognize Crimea as Russian territory. Okay, so huge update. Finally, one last thing I want to share with you guys here from Max 24 again. Rubio will not travel to London for Ukraine talks from the U.S. State Department. Trump Special Envoy Kellogg will attend the meeting. Okay, so interesting. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is not going to be in London tomorrow. Okay, so he's been involved in basically all of these high-level talks throughout the duration of the Trump administration trying to end this war with Russia and Ukraine. And all of a sudden, he's not going to be there. And I thought that was interesting. Why would the U.S. Secretary of State not be there? Are they expecting that nothing concrete is going to come from this? I mean, Marco Rubio just last week was speaking to reporters and basically saying that, you know, if Ukraine and Russia don't come to any agreement, and if we don't see any progress being made towards ending this war, that the U.S. will begin to pull their support for trying to lead these peace deal efforts and completely pull out even at some point as well. Okay, so that's an interesting sign that we're seeing here. Makes me wonder if they're not expecting anything big to happen, just the fact that U.S. Secretary of State is not going to be there. So you guys can let me know if you think that's something significant or not. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But I just wanted to throw this in there and let you guys know about that could be possibly a sign that the U.S. is not expecting a good outcome. So we'll see how things go tomorrow. We should have a lot of big news coming out from this war. And again, I will do another update with you guys, giving you some information on Russia's side on what they're proposing right now as well. I'll do a separate video for you guys later today. So I want to thank you so much for tuning in for this update. If you got something out of this, please smash that like button. Also, if you enjoy my content, please consider subscribing down below. Hit the notification bell. That way YouTube can notify you. And with that, hope you all have a great day. Everybody take care and God bless. And we'll see you in the next one.